is wonderful to see you all, and thank you, Jisei and Ryoshin. Uh, my name is Fugan, and I am joining you from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where we have the Hyannis Zendo Sitting Group, a affiliate of the Village Zendo out here. And it is spring out here, but spring has not really quite sprung yet on the Cape. It comes kind of slowly. We've got a few, flowers. Just the greens of them are starting to break through. The trees are still bare. The whales have started to appear on the outer Cape, I hear, and nearby we've got some gray seals, a family of them that have taken up a brief residence as they usually do this time of year before the water gets too warm and they continue on their way. And this morning, the osprey arrived. So that's sort of our biggest marker of spring out here, when the ospreys show up. And another big marker is Shuso Hosen, right? That happened last week. That's a marker for all of us. When we have that ceremony at the end of our winter ango, it feels like we've stepped into spring. And this year's Shuso Hosen, I see a lot of people who were there with us this morning. It was, the end of a beautiful winter ango led by our Shuso Hongo. And he was our practice leader, and on Sunday he gave his first public dharma talk. He did a lot of the beautiful ceremonies we do and engaged in dharma combat with the community, or as we like to say, dharma dialogue, dharma discourse. And it was wonderful. It was joyful and a profound ceremony. And for me, seeing all of us on Zoom participating in Shuso Hosen, it was clear that the essence of this is community. It's a celebration of community, celebration of the sangha treasure. And in Shuso Hosen this year, as it's been for the last few years, I was struck by the upaya, the skillful means that we use to make it happen, or especially that a really strong group of committed Village Zendo members who have organized this whole wonderful online Zendo have put together. This adaptation of our ritual to Zoom allowed us to connect with each other intimately and deeply. And we connected with Ango, and we connected with the breadth and depth of our practice community, going back generations, in fact, to those earliest Ango periods, the winter retreat periods. And so today my talk is really going to be about forms that sustain us. And if 2 years ago we had said, oh, we're about to enter a pandemic and we're going to move our practice online, we're going to do winter and summer angos online for the next couple of years and offer interviews and daily sitting through something called Zoom, we would have all said, no way will that work. And we would have really been shocked if we thought that could grow and strengthen our community. And yet, look at us all here. And so I guess maybe since Sunday, I've been really thinking about the effectiveness of this ceremony that we did together, the power of it. And like all our forms, Shuso Hosen is held together with a series of small rituals that we repeat year after year. And even just our period of zazen that preceded Shuso Hosen, or preceded this talk today, is full of forms and rituals that we do over and over again, that we repeat. There's dozens and dozens of ways of being, that help support us in this practice. You know, we've all entered our sitting spaces, these beautiful varied spaces that we can see in each other's windows here. You know, we don't just plop down on the cushion, we bow to the cushion. We bow to the Zendo, you know, on the computer. And if you offered incense, you might have bowed to an altar in a very controlled way. You know, after lighting your candle, then offering the incense and holding it to your forehead, placing it down, bowing again, turning in a prescribed manner. And then, you know, maybe at home you've done away with incense. Probably not a bad idea for your breathing, although it's wonderful to sit with incense as well. But you sat in your cushion in a particular way. You know, getting into your zazen position is a somewhat organized and formalized practice. We have so many movements and gestures to get ourselves ready for zazen. We put our left hand on top of our right and gently touch our thumbs together. We sit upright, ears over shoulders, and our nose in line with the navel, as Dogen taught us in his Fugan Zazenji, the universal way of zazen. Right, we follow this form that was written down by Dogen 800 years ago and has been practiced over and over again. We embody this shared format, this shared structure, this shared container. And of course, the first few times around, it's unfamiliar. We don't know the ritual. But eventually these repeated gestures and movements become quite ordinary to us. And they're not ideas of zazen, they're not philosophies of Buddhism. They're remembered and embodied gestures, right? Remembered, literally rebodied in us each time. And together, these steps deliver us into this experience of sitting down together. Right? We've followed this script dozens of times, or hundreds of times, or maybe thousands of times. The embodied and sounded experience of zazen. It's a container, it's something we do together. Even when we're hundreds of miles apart, in some cases thousands of miles apart. So a woman named Elizabeth Helmuth Margulis, who is a music theorist, a musicologist, and she's also a cognitive scientist. She's been writing about ritual in terms of music. And she talks about ritual as, quote, collective action that is repetitive and scripted. And some hallmarks of ritual that she's noted are that ritual tends to be compulsory and time-consuming. Right, so we could check that off for Zen practice. We show up, we have to sit, and it takes up a lot of our time. Ritual values precise adherence to the details of past performances. Right, so if you've had a service position, you've felt the pressure of this precise adherence to past performances. In ritual, typical goals of activities are demoted. And so this makes me think of having a meal together, right? Eating lunch, oryoki style. The sort of eating part is there, but it is definitely demoted from its usual place when we sit down, not in oryoki. And it includes a high degree of repetition and redundancy. And this is over and over again, sitting on the cushion, coming back to our breath. and coming back to our breath again and again. A psychologist named Matt Rossano says that ritual is a visible manifestation of our intentionality used to transmit social norms. And this transmission, he says, often takes place with the full emotional force of group synchronized behavior. So sitting down for zazen this morning, chanting together, celebrating Shuso Hosen last week, this carries a force that transcends the distances where we are. And because of our commitment, this synchronized form, this ritual supports this group. It's an embodied, repeated action with attention to the very particular elements that are done piece by piece and together comprise the whole. So in his talk on Sunday, Hongo focused on the essential freedom of Bodhidharma's emptiness. And as he was giving this talk on freedom, the freedom itself was manifest in the container of the form of a Dharma talk. Right? And afterwards, Kaiku chanted the verse, and then we had the speeches, right? This is a 3-foot-long black snake. A long time ago, it became a Kampura flower on Mount Gudakutra. Right? It resonates in us, in the intimacy of this Dharma practice. And in the Dharma dialogue we had, right, this question and answer where this beautiful connection was manifest. Thank you for your answer. May your life go well. Bah. Right, all these forms joined us together. And we attended these gestures together as well in our roles as questioners, chanters, active listeners, witnesses. And we brought this very formal structure into being as a unique expression, a living expression of Village Zendo Shuso Hosen 2022. So Tokyu Hoshi has titled his workshops on the liturgy Forms of Emptiness, which is just so beautiful. Every time I think of that expression, it just really strikes me. And the individual forms of liturgy, bringing our palms together in gasho, ringing the bell, striking the makugyo or a drum, our chanting. These are moments in which the freedom of emptiness that Hongo talked about manifest in form. And all these forms function together in the whole of our liturgy. And not just in the person ringing the bell, but in all of us experiencing it. And so this Elizabeth Margulis, that musicologist, categorizes the repeated expressions that make up rituals as gestures, small individual gestures. And in ritual, she writes, there is excessive, explicit attention to individual gestures that are usually performed without special thought. And while she's talking about how ritual and music are parallel or are often one thing, and how repetition takes us into the heart of the musical experience, she could just as easily be talking about our Zen practice. Right? Excessive, explicit attention to individual gestures performed without special thought. Rather than making things routine or mundane, this ritualization opens us up to these individual moments, to these gestures in ways that go beyond or maybe before thought and connect us in community and sangha. And I think these rituals are not just in our Zen practice. These are in the daily gestures that make up the rituals of our life. In the Shobogenzo Dogen has a chapter called Washing the Face, which details the task of washing your face and brushing your teeth. And Dogen used a willow twig as a toothbrush, which was how the Buddha and his sangha cleaned their teeth. And Dogen instructs us in using this willow twig. He says, hold this willow twig in your right hand and chant a vow. And the vow he teaches is from the Avatamsaka Sutra. Holding the willow twig, I vow, may all beings attain the true dharma and experience original purity. Brushing my teeth, I vow, may all beings attain a fang that subdues and crushes all delusions. Rinsing the mouth, may all beings approach the pure Dharma gate and accomplish liberation. Right? And this verse is still practiced in our school, in the Soto school. And many of you probably know Thich Nhat Hanh's beautiful Gata on brushing the teeth, which is drawn from the same source. He shares, brushing my teeth and rinsing my mouth, I vow to speak purely and lovingly. When my mouth is fragrant with right speech, a flower blooms in the garden of my heart. Dogen then goes on to describe all the details of brushing your teeth with the willow twig. Talks about the length of the twig and the width of the twig and the time for brushing and how to recycle the used twig or toothbrush. And he even shares a great story of the Buddha's teeth brushing. When the Buddha threw his willow twig on the ground, it started growing into a tree. Its roots and stems emerged thickly. It became 500 yojna high. Its branches and leaves spread like clouds and covered all over. It opened blossom as large as wheels. It bore fruit as large as jars. Its roots, stems, branches, and leaves were made of 7 treasures, which were extremely beautiful, reflecting and illuminating various colors, overshadowing the sun and moon, and so on. At the end, a great number of seekers received the Buddha fruits and ascended to heaven. So the toothbrush is the first of 18 essential items that Dogen lists for a wandering monk to carry with her. Brushing the teeth, says Dogen, is literally a way to make an offering to the Buddha. Those who clarify the use of a willow twig are bodhisattvas who clarify Buddha Dharma, says Dogen. Those who do not yet clarify this have not yet dreamed of Buddha Dharma. This being so, seeing a willow twig is seeing a Buddha ancestor. Seeing your toothbrush is seeing a Buddha ancestor. So why so much attention to brushing the teeth? All forms, Dogen writes, are Tathagata forms. There is never a single form that merges with what is not a Tathagata form. Because these forms are nothing but Tathagata forms, Fugan said that all forms are all forms. And this Fugan is Fugan Wenyi, who lived in the 9th to 10th centuries, and he was regarded as the founder of the Fugan school of Zen, one of the 5 schools of Chinese Zen. And in a koan featuring Fugan, a short koan, 2 monks rolled up bamboo blinds from the Muman Kan, we can get a glimpse of how all forms are Tathagata forms, are forms of suchness, or are forms of emptiness, we can say. So once Great Master Fugan was about to give a teaching before the midday meal. He gestured with his finger at the blinds, and at that, 2 monks went to roll them up alike. Fugan responded, one gains, the other loses. Or in another translation, he says, one has it, the other has not. Like brushing our teeth, just rolling up the blinds, it's a simple thing. Yet Fugan points to the complications. He injects gain and loss into this simple moment. And he's pointing to our ever-present, discriminating mind and the misery we create for ourselves and in the world in our efforts to fill up this sense of lack. When Fayan says of the monks, one has it, the other has not, we want to have it too, right? We want to understand why one gains and one loses. In his poem on this koan, Muman says, "Rolling it up, the great space is utterly clear and bright." But this open spaciousness does not accord with our tradition. Rolling it up, when we roll up the blinds, the inside and outside are joined in oneness, no separation, bliss. But stopping there is not our practice, does not accord with our tradition. Muman says, when even emptiness is let go of, then not even the slightest breeze passes through. Letting go of gain and loss, attainment and lack, awakening and delusion. Then what? One commentator says, or equates this breeze with the 8 winds of duality, which are gain and loss, defamation and recognition, praise and ridicule, sorrow and joy. So letting go of even emptiness, these winds cease blowing. Or maybe the dharma wind ceases blowing, the wind that blows everywhere. And when we let go of emptiness, we become one with it. Right? We let go of our separation from the dharma wind. So how can it blow if it is us? There's a poem added to this koan by Tian Tong that begins, "Pines are straight, brambles are crooked. Cranes are tall, ducks are short." Zhuangzi said, "The long do not have excess, the short are not lacking. Therefore, though ducks' legs are short, they'll be miserable if you add to them. And though cranes' legs are long, they'll be unhappy if you cut them off." Elizabeth Margulis, that musicologist, says that like ritual, when we listen deeply to music, we shift from a cognitive, declarative mind to an engaged, embodied experience. She says this leads to a sense that the boundaries of self have dissolved into the surroundings, to a sense of being played by the music. I think we could just say, just music. When we engage our forms of Zen practice, the container reveals us as forms of emptiness. Bowing, sitting, chanting, our Shuso Hosen ceremony, brushing our teeth or rolling up the blinds. It's just this together. So thank you for your practice and your attention.